Bom dia! Está começando agora mais um programa 20 Minutos e dessa vez é uma edição especial. Nós vamos receber aqui John Shipton, pai do ativista Julian Assange e um dos mais ativos lutadores pela libertação do fundador do Wikileaks. Desde 2010, quando revelou documentos secretos da diplomacia norte-americana, Assange é perseguido pelo governo dos Estados Unidos. Este governo deseja extraditá-lo do Reino Unido, onde atualmente Assange está preso, para julgá-lo por espionagem em solo americano. Embora Assange não estivesse lá quando os documentos vazados pela militar Chelsea Manning foram expostos pelo Wikileaks. No caso de extradição, Assange provavelmente seria condenado a penas que, na prática, significam a prisão perpétua. Nós vamos conversar com John Shipton, então, logo depois da vinheta. Mr. John Shipton, thank you very much. It's an honor to have you here at Opera Mundi.
Thank you, Harold.
Mr. Shipton, when was the last time you were with your son? In what conditions is he imprisoned, and what is his current state of health?
I saw Julian last October. At that time, his physical health was improving because he had started to walk from city to city in Europe. So he had set himself this task to walk the number up and down the cell, which is 3 meters, up and down the cell from one city to the next. For example, from Paris to Barcelona. So, yeah, and his overall, what we talk about is when we visit or when I speak on the phone is first we talk about the children, his grandchildren, his children, my grandchildren, and then we talk about brothers and sisters and Stella, friends, and then finally what I can do next or what I will do next or where I'm going next, and news from the wider world, like for example, I once met your President Lula in Geneva. And then I met him again in Paris. So that sort of news lifts Julian's spirits,
And how was Assange prior to his arrest? He spent 7 years in exile and confinement and at the Ecuadorian embassy before Ecuador handed him over to UK in 2019.
Well, in 2019, after Julian was dragged out of the Ecuadorian embassy and incarcerated in Belmarsh maximum security prison just outside London, the United Nations Rapporteur on Torture and Unusual Punishment visited Julian in the jail and wrote a 26-page report declaring that Julian was being psychologically tortured by smearing, mobbing, endless court cases, restriction of due process, abuse of process, restriction of his human rights, and so on. That report was submitted to the United Kingdom government and the United States government and the government of Sweden and tabled in the Australian Parliament. And that report describes accurately the effects of the 7.5 years of confinement in the Ecuadorian embassy and the resulting psychological, what do you call it, torture or unusual punishment.
Mr. John, Assange's defense did various appeals to avoid his extradition to United States. At this moment now, how is the defense working to prevent the United Kingdom from sending him to United States?
Julian has an appeal to the High Court for a hearing underway. It's now been a little over a month since Julian and his lawyers applied, and we are waiting for their decision. So this is the last appeal that Julian can make. After that, Julian would have to appeal to the European Court of Human Rights to stay his extradition to the United States.
You became one of the most prominent spokesperson advocating Julian's freedom. How have other family members been involved in this work?
This is a good question. Stella is particularly tireless and travels, her area is in Europe, and she goes from country to country advocating for Julian whenever she can get a platform or an audience. Just keep in mind that Stella has 2 children by Julian who are young and need her company. But despite that, with the assistance of a babysitter, Stella manages to make day trips over to Europe or wherever is required. For Julian's brother, Gabriel, he made the film Ithaka and has set up several institutions in Australia to continue advocating for Julian's freedom. Julian's mum, she continues her work on Twitter and writing wherever she can get a letter published. So we all we all continuously work. A lot of the time, for example, in South America, we don't have to do any work. We only have to catalyze the support that's already there. South America, the Colombian president, Petro, has declared support. President Obrador of Mexico has declared support several times. President Lula has declared support vigorously, by the way. President Fernandez of Argentina has declared support. Mujica, the retired president of Paraguay, he equally declares support, and the president of Chile. So, I can safely say that the entirety of Latin America is appreciative and supportive.
As you talk about that, I would ask you, how important is the support of a Brazilian president, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, to advocate the freedom of Julian?
I would say, without exaggeration, that it's life-saving, that President Lula has contributed to saving Julian's life, a vital concern. Also, President Lula has made clear to all people of the world and in South America in particular, the importance of the contribution of Julian Assange and Chelsea Manning to the movement in the last 12 years of South American countries towards sovereignty, really important, towards sovereignty, the end of the Monroe Doctrine, and towards the unity of South America and Latin America towards their own understanding of how a civilization will emerge.
Outside South America, which countries or regions are more supportive to Assange?
I suppose you could say, Haroldo, those that have suffered most are the countries that most vigorously support Julian. So in the case of Greece, 1/3 of the parliament, that's 100 members of the parliament of 300, all support Julian Assange. So, and then after that, it would be France. Yeah. Now, I don't wish to leave anybody out, you know. They've been in Barcelona, they're very, very strong in support for Julian.
You are in Brazil because to release the film Ithaka on this subject, on the persecution of Assange, and how this move is helping to explain to the world how why Julian should be released.
Well, there's a few things, you know. First of all, we make plain the understanding that Julian has been cruelly persecuted by the United States, the United Kingdom, and Sweden. We make that plain. We also make plain that it's only through support of Julian's family and people around the world that Julian will become free. It's people, it's us, ordinary people around the world who have gathered together, millions of us, to support Julian and consequently support our own societies, nations, and families. When we demand from governments to be able to speak to each other without constraint, for me to be able to talk to you and maybe we have a glass of wine or some food and we exchange views of what is the policy of Brazil, or what is the policy of Mexico, which president do you prefer? Why do you prefer that president? Which government, are you left wing or right wing or in the center? Why? And we discuss this with each other and we bring knowledge to a higher level. And as a consequence, we contribute to ourselves personally, to our families, to our community of friends, and to our nation. Without us people, a nation doesn't exist. It's just trees and grass. And the genius of Brazil, where does it come from? It doesn't come from the sky down. It arises from the people upwards, from us. It's so simple.
Julian Assange played an important role in revealing the classified documents of American diplomacy. Do you think the American way to work outside their borders changed after the WikiLeaks reveals?
Yes. Well, I think what changed is our understanding, as you say, of the methodology of the United States diplomacy. When our understanding changed, then this forced the United States to make movements away from their previous methodology. So it came about only through our understanding. It didn't come about through the United States wishing to reform itself. It came about because we said no. And this is sufficient, just to say no. I'll give you, if you allow me, I'll give you an example. When Rafael Correa was elected as president of Ecuador, he read a cable. This cable said that the elite police force in Ecuador were paid extra money by the United States Embassy. So Rafael had a problem. What to do? Because the loyalty of the elite police was not to the presidency of Ecuador, it was to the US Embassy. What to do? So Rafael increased the wages of all the policemen in Ecuador to the level of the elite police that were being paid by the US Embassy, and was able to have a stable government and prevent his own assassination.
Do you believe Rafael Correa is another victim of the WikiLeaks reveals? So Rafael Correa was turned in enemy of United States because of his support to Julian.
Yeah, I do. That's correct. Yes, that Rafael, in defending the sovereignty of Ecuador, in defending the distribution of wealth in Ecuador, became a victim of the policies of the United States of America. This is true. This is irrefutable fact.
But the fact that he received Julian Assange in that moment became him another level of enemy of United States. He became somebody who really should be stopped, and that's why he cannot return to Ecuador nowadays.
Yes, but in the positive, if we look at it in the positive, that Rafael Correa achieved three things. One is that everybody now knows of the country Ecuador. Okay. Two, everybody who is in politics or in media is aware of attributes of the Constitution of Ecuador. They're very fine. Three, all the world and South America realized, because of the publicity surrounding the asylum given to Julian Assange, the circumstances of government in South American states, and in particular Ecuador. We all know now, prior to Rafael giving asylum to Julian, we only knew that Ecuador exported bananas. Now we know the government, the conditions of government, the conditions that the United States imposes upon government, and the ways whereby sovereignty may be achieved. We know this from the simple act of giving Julian Assange asylum.
Not simple, but not easy act.
No, it's true.
Have you, as a militant spokesman of Julian Assange freedom, have received any pressure or something that people trying to stop you to do your work from the US government? Somebody tried to stop you, said you that it's better you to stop, something like that?
No, why would they? I'm an old man wandering around I don't have an army. I don't have a police force. I don't have a walking stick to shake at people. So they don't bother me at all, and in some ways, some parts of the administration of the United States favor me because of advocacy of the beauty of the First Amendment and the Bill of Rights of the United States, because that's what when in the United States, that's what I speak about, the beauty. They have this wonderful thing, which they call the Bill of Rights. And in the United States, I advocate that all the time.
And do you could perceive any differences in how Republicans and Democrats in United States handle the Julian Assange case? It was different in the Trump's administration, now by the Biden administration, or it's a question of state and deep state United States, they have the same position towards this issue?
I can't, privately, I don't know institutionally, but privately, okay, I meet, or Gabrielle and I meet Republican congressmen, and some of them are supportive and helpful. We meet the squad or the progressive section of the Democratic Party, and they're supportive and helpful. Institutionally, the Republicans and the Democrats are probably no different in their understanding of Julian Assange and Chelsea Manning, institutionally, but independently and privately, they are supportive of what we do, and they're vigorous. This is important. In Missouri versus Biden, a couple of months ago, Judge Doherty made a decision to support the First Amendment against government interference. Government interference meaning the FBI, the White House, the CIA, the CDC, and the NIAH, who are all instructing Twitter to remove posts or remove the platform from people. So Judge Doherty made a decision to defend the First Amendment. So I take that as an indication that there is a change appearing in the administration of justice in America, not through the institution of the Department of Justice, but through independent federal court judges. This is a good sign.
And it's a good sign to Julian Assange also, to this case in particular?
Yes, I think so. I think so. And it would indicate that if Julian were to be extradited to the United States, the courts would embarrass the Department of Justice by ruling in Julian's favor. So I imagine that the Department of Justice will do everything they can not to have Julian extradited to the United States. At the moment in Australia, you might have heard that the United States ambassador to Australia, Caroline Kennedy, has been saying publicly there's a deal available.
Okay, so you believe something can change in the next months on this case? Is that what you are saying?
Yes, I think so. Yeah.
You talk about Australia. How Australian government works this case nowadays? Because it's there also we have a difference between the between the parties, and how Assange's case is a problem. Is it a problem to Australian government today?
Well, it's a problem, that they have to solve. But the entire polity, both sides of Parliament, the opposition and the Prime Minister, so the opposition leader Dutton and Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, all make supporting statements that Julian must come home. This is very important. Half of the Australian Parliament want Julian returned home, and 50 members of the Australian Parliament, 217 total, 50 members, are in the Assange group. 88% of the Australian populace want Julian brought home. The United States ambassador to Australia, Caroline Kennedy, says publicly, there's a deal available, please take it, get this problem off our back. But what is upsetting is that Caroline Kennedy says there's a deal available. This puts the weight of decision on the victim. They want Julian to solve the problem that they made by taking a deal.
But what kind of deal?
Well, with the United States, whoever knows? They say yes today and no tomorrow, really.
And in the United Kingdom, there is any difference between conservatives and the Workers' Party, or no?
Certain conservatives are supportive. David Davis, for example, who used to be chairman of the Conservative Party, his supporter. On the left, there are supporters. I think in the Assange group in the United Kingdom Parliament, there are 25 members. However, currently, institutionally, on the Labour Party and the Liberal and the Tory Party and the government, there's no sympathy for Julian Assange, institutionally. Yeah, no sympathy whatsoever.
Here in Brazil, we believed before that all happened, that in the United Kingdom would be impossible to believe that the UK government would accept to extradite Assange to United States. But nowadays, it's not clear that that would happen. Uh, why do United Kingdom accept, in your opinion, such pressure of United States?
Well, to be frank, I think that they're equal partners. I don't feel that the United Kingdom is responding to instructions from the United States. I think that they don't want Wikileaks or Julian Assange in the United Kingdom. They don't like Wikileaks. They don't like having to deal with revelations of their own criminal or illegal behavior. So they want to chase him away, whatever way they can. They've been completely malicious for 14 years. Julian is held incommunicado. You remember when President Lula was in jail, he was able to see people, journalists, and speak to them. Julian Assange is held
I was with Lula. It was not easy to get to the prison to interview him, but I went in September 2019, after years trying. But you are right. He could. Assange is much more waiting for this than Lula.
Yeah, Julian can't see any journalists, He can't make personal statements. He hasn't been allowed to go to court for his own hearings for over a year. Or now it's 2 years. So they just want to get rid of him. Whatever, they're really malicious people, There's no need. Julian's a publisher and he's kept in a maximum security prison. Julian uses a pencil and he's in a prison for terrorists who use machine guns and bombs.
Mr. John, it's been 13 years since Wikileaks released all these documents of American diplomacy. Why, after that, United States is there, Hillary Clinton tried twice to be president. A lot of things happen, other papers, other leaks around the world, and United States could not forgive Assange. Why is it so difficult to United States to accept this case?
Well, I think it's the vindictive nature of certain United States institutions. As the United States has begun its decline, its control of news or control of what we know about the United States has increased. They don't want us to know anything. They don't want us to know that they owe $31 trillion. They don't want us to know that their weapons are no good and have failed in Ukraine. They don't want us to know that 350,000 kids have been killed in Ukraine, let alone the injured. They don't want us to know that Ukraine started out a few years ago with 38 million population, is now down to 26, 27 million approximately, because everybody ran away, and those young men that couldn't run away are dead, they don't want us to know that. They don't want us to know that they bribe this politician and that politician and use, for example, in the case of Argentina, the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, to keep Argentina broke for years and years and decades and decades. One item is the vindictiveness of Hillary Clinton, who, rather than accept blame herself for her own failure to be elected president, wants to blame everybody else, Russia, Julian Assange, the cat and the dog, their fault, so she blames everybody. Another thing is that Hillary Clinton mentored Jake Sullivan, who's now head of the National Security Agency, United States, and mentored Victoria Nuland, who's now Assistant Secretary of State. So both of these people are very high officials, and they can make decisions as to whether this prosecution or persecution continues. Also, there's the momentum, institutional momentum. Once these institutions start something, they just continue it because people come to work, they get paid, they don't have to make any decisions. It's a piece of paper says Julian Assange has to be tried for espionage. They give it a tick and so that institutional momentum. But in my view, it originates from the deep state, and in particular, part of the deep state is the National Security Agency head, Jake Sullivan, and Victoria Nuland, and at the head of the pyramid, the top of the pyramid, Hillary Clinton.
Mr. Shipton, when you decided to become an activist to free Assange, when you started to do this job you are doing now, talking to me?
I think in two stages. Once in 2011 for a couple of years, and then in 2016 with more intensity, and finally with strong intensity after August 2019. So in those moving in three stages, with increasing understanding and intensity. Like when you start off, you think it's going to be very simple, and at this stage, you just do what you can with faith that life is not futile. That you're not doing something futile. I don't use hope. I just use faith that our conversation today is going to contribute to Julian's freedom, and also contribute to our own understanding of what the phenomena of Wikileaks and its revelations, and Julian Assange and his oppression, and our conversation contribute to that. So those just a man said to me that the ocean is full of raindrops.
It's a beautiful image.
Yeah.
email. Mr. Shipton, Assange do not grow with you, did not grow with you. He was adopted by another family. A lot of things happened. It's past, nothing important now. But I would say that if you became more close in this year when he's in prison, now he's. How is your relationship with him today?
Well, we always spoke on the same level, and of course, all relationships grow over time and change their nature and deepen and thicken, and so that has been the case. Julian gets a 10-minute phone call. A maximum length of time is 10 minutes. And I haven't seen Julian since October, and I will go and see Julian again in this October. So that'll be 12 months, which is quite a bit of time. But in that 12 months, we have many conversations, and I think a contribution to finalizing the circumstance of Julian's oppression and bringing to clarity, crystalline clarity, the meaning of the persecution of Julian Assange. So it's greater meaning. And this has three vital, profound elements. One is in 1948, the United Nations adopted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It took 10,000 years of civilization to arrive at that global circumstance. That's one. Two, the adoption in 1973 by the United Nations General Assembly of the Conventions of Asylum. Really important. At 1973, there were 10,000 people seeking asylum in Santiago in different missions, in different embassies. So South America understands in its soul, in the air it breathes in and out, every person, 600 million people, understand the meaning of the Conventions of Asylum. Next, the establishment of the United Nations Charter that states, nation states, relate to each other and pursue their interests through a body of agreements. The persecution of Julian Assange has made it clear to us the decline and the abandonment of those magnificent civilizational artifacts by the authors of those artifacts, by the United Kingdom, France, United States. And you will see that as Brazil is a leader in the BRICS, B in BRICS meaning Brazil, is reinstituting, is remaking the wonders of the 20th century, the wonders of the late 20th century. The United Nations Charter of Laws, and through Lula, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and through President Obrador, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. In my view, South America carries on its shoulders the weight of the world. That's in my view. Equally, Russia and China. But because of the experience of Latin America, not South America, Latin America, because of their experience, they relate more readily to the importance of these magnificent artifacts of the late 20th century.
Mr. Shipton, one last question. You are proud of your son?
Yes, very much. Yes.
Thank you very much for your interview. Obrigado a todos que estiverem assistindo. Peço que compartilhem, espalhem. É muito importante para a liberdade do Assange e para a liberdade de imprensa em todo o mundo. Bye bye. Thank you.
Obrigado, Haroldo. Bye bye.